I'm really sorry. What?
I was going to jump in for once. I was going to jump in with something today. But if you got something, I'll back off.
Well, here's the thing. If you're jumping in with something, that probably means it's something worth discussing. Whereas I was going to take us on this merry little journey about there being a leak at the beef silo. So I'm okay to put the beef silo on hold.
Look, I'll put it this way. If a week from now you remember your thoughts about the beef silo, I'd love to hear them. But for once, I've got a little story.
Fair enough.
And by that time, the beef silo situation will probably have resolved itself.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I'm concerned about the structural integrity of the beef silo. I'm just going to say, there is too much leaking beef, and Surrey is the entire town or county, whichever one it is, of Surrey, is very unhappy. But I will deal with that. I'll have a word with the local ombudsman and get it all sorted while you tell your story.
Well, look, it's very rare that I have one and that the ADHD doesn't make me forget it before it's time for Podquisition, so I've got one of those little rambling ways we're going to intro today, something that's not video games I'm going to bring to the table. I went swimming this morning with my lovely wife, as I do once a week. We go for a little swim, one morning a week. And usually, swimming, it's a lot of back and forth, being sensible, doing exercise, doing a little lane swimming. But today, they opened up like half the pool to be like, hey, do you want to just fuck around and not do exercise swimming? And me and Jane had a bit of a fuck around. We had like half an hour left to swim in, and we were like, you know what? I don't want to be boring and swim back and forth doing me lengths. And to put it bluntly, we were just being a bit gay in the water. We're just being wet.
It's a good place to be gay.
It's a good place to be gay. We would swim past each other and just oops touched your butt while we were swimming. Oh, silly. Oops, maybe touched a boob while doing a swim. Being a bit gay, doing a bit of a giggle, being a bit silly. And as we're getting out the swimming pool, lifeguard comes up and walks over to the two of us. And I'm bracing for like, oh god, is this like there's a rule against heavy petting and we're doing a bit too much touching in the pool, I
was going to say, like, heavy petting is one of the big no-nos. We've all seen the signs at the swimming pools.
You're not supposed to touch your titty in the swimming pool, I know. And this I've never been spoken to by any of the lifeguards at the swimming pool before, and this gentleman walks over to the two of us and goes, "Good job, ladies." And we've been riding that shit all day, because we've never been told we've done a good job at swimming before, when we do our, like, boring swim back and forth doing exercise. But fucking around just being a bit gay touching titties a couple times. Gay horseplay. Like, at one point Jane lifted me up out the water from underwater and I did a bit of a giggle. Apparently that gets me a good job from the lifeguard.
That's amazing.
So have I been doing swimming wrong? Am I meant to be doing swimming gayer? Are other people doing gay swimming and being told, good job, ladies?
Well, here's the thing. People look at those signs at the swimming pool saying stuff you can't do. No one's considered the opposite and equal response is also valid. That there is a sign somewhere of stuff you can and should do. So maybe heavy petting, that's on the no-no sign. Maybe there's a sign somewhere that says light petting. Yes, please.
Light petting, brackets particularly if gay, yes, please.
There we go. Good job, ladies.
The feeling I've had, and this is the only way I can put it, is I've been walking around all day today feeling like I found a secret side quest in swimming. I found the secret side quest you can do where you get told, yeah, that's swimming. Pretty gay. Well done.
That's amazing. I mean, it just goes to show you, like, if you experiment with the mechanics, you might stumble upon a whole new strand of gameplay.
Exactly. Don't let anyone tell you you're doing video games wrong. If maybe you unlock the good job, ladies. Ending.
Right. Go to the pool, be gay, get congratulated by a lifeguard. That's you set for the next week.
It's very rare I get congratulated for being gay and not being
true.
as, like, studious as I'm expected to be. I need life to hand me more of those wins. I can do that. I can do distracted gay.
And hats off to the lifeguard as well.
Right?
Yeah.
I know nothing about this lifeguard, but I've decided they're legit. I've decided they're good people.
I'm of the mind that when you see somebody doing a good job, you should tell them.
That is true.
In my head, look, I know nothing about this man. I have decided he is the politest ally.
Yeah.
He's just, look at you. Look at the, that was gay. Well done.
The best
there.
kind of ally. The one that doesn't bring it up, just occasionally looks at gay horseplay and just says, yep, carry on. That's all I want from an ally. I just want a little nod of approval and yep, good work. Good work on the gay horseplay.
Isn't it just?
Yeah. There should be a purge for swimming pools where one day a year, heavy petting and bombing into the water is allowed. So that thought just arrived inside my head and I had to get it out. I'd love that.
Look,
the splurge.
Maybe it's secretly allowed. Maybe there's, as you say, maybe there's a sign somewhere that says no bombing in the pool unless you do it holding hands with each other and touching butts. If you're touching butts with someone else while you bomb in, that's gay, so it's okay.
It's like the McDonald's secret menu. There are secret swimming pool rules. And you unlocked one of them.
Yeah.
Gay horseplay. Queer fucking about.
My advice, gay horseplay, secretly a positive way to do swimming.
Yeah. But remember, the line between light and heavy petting is a thin one. And by the time there's a cock in your mouth, you've crossed it.
On that note, welcome to Podquisition.
Yes.
We talk about...
I've never given a blowjob at a swimming pool. Sorry, I just want to make that clear.
Of course not. Of course not. Never.
Oh, God.
Never, ever, ever.
I wouldn't want the chlorine in my mouth. It'd take away the taste of the delicious spunk.
Yeah, that's really what the shower's for, isn't it?
That's true. That's true.
So, I know I've kicked us off today, but now it's time to talk about video games, and I have a desire to keep talking today.
Wow, welcome to my world. That's how I live my day-to-day life. I've just been talking for the past 10 minutes, but I've got a desire to keep going.
Look,
I feel very relatable with you right now.
Usually I would throw it to someone else, but
yeah.
Fuck it, this is my week. I'm taking charge. I'm riding the ADHD.
You're the good job pull
vibes
girl.
where they're going.
Like, you can do what you want.
I did another thing to do with video games this week, and I'm gonna fucking talk about it. I worked on a video game like 2 years ago that I can finally tell people I worked on. I wanted to be able to say today, hooray, I'm in the credits of a video game for the first time. I'm not, but I will be. I will be. We'll get there. I'm gonna be in the game's credits. It'll happen. So, the first 2 chapters of Life is Strange Double Exposure came out the day before we record this, and the short version of the story is about... Oh god, when would it have been? September 2021, so about 3 years ago, the last Life is Strange game, True Colors, came out. And I did an accessibility review of that game, and I talked about some of the issues with it, and I did a follow-up that kind of got some news coverage where I talked to the studio about the fact that they didn't subtitle songs in the game, which meant that for deaf players or people playing on streamer mode, there were moments where, like, huge amounts of game context were missing. Because, like, a character is singing and you have no idea what the tone of that scene is. And then, when would this have been? Like, early 2023, I get an email from Square Enix going, hey, we would like you to come do some accessibility consulting on a game. Can't tell you what it is. Gotta sign a shit ton of NDAs before we can tell you what it is. And it turns out it was going to be a new Life is Strange game, and, you know, I learned a little bit about it. I knew it was going to have, like, a hopping between alternate timelines mechanic going on, and was able to work out that protagonist from the first one, Max, was coming back. And I got to see my accessibility video referenced a bunch of times in an internal company accessibility planning doc they'd been using, where they were, like, planning out things that they might do in this next game and why they're important, and they kept citing my video, and that was a really, really exciting thing. I've done a bit of this over the last few years of shit I can't talk about, but this is one of the first ones that's actually come out where I can point at it and go, hey, it's a big name video game, what people might have heard of, and I helped make it more accessible for people, and I'm pretty excited about that. as such, massive caveat that, any opinions I have about this video game, take them with the biggest grain of salt in the world because I cannot be trusted. But I do want to talk about a little bit about the new Life is Strange, because I didn't work on any of the stuff to do with the plot. And I'm not going to go into big spoilers, but I do want to talk a little bit about something I think is fucking fascinating about this game, plot-wise. The original Life is Strange, at least for me, was largely a game about being a teenage lesbian trying to work out exactly how much of the planet you would be willing to throw in the bin in order to save your hot blue-haired lesbian girlfriend. It is a story of a character, who realizes, I've got time travel powers and I've got to solve this mystery. But ultimately, the original series boils down to a choice that people have dubbed Bay versus Bay, as in B-A-E versus B-A-Y. You ultimately have a choice at the end of the first game of, I can save the life of this blue-haired lesbian, but I will have to let an entire town get hit by a fucking tornado and wiped off the map and everyone die. But I will get to be gay. Or let the blue-haired gay die to save the town. And I, like all rational people, let that town die, fuck that town, I need a lesbian happy ending. The one thing I will talk about plot-wise about the first episode of Double Exposure is that it takes a fascinating swing narratively, a big fucking risk, in terms of how the game responds to players like me, who made that choice at the end of the first game, who were willing to let an entire town die for the sake of gay. Which is, this new game, set several years later, your blue-haired character is not around, and someone will ask you in-universe, hey, what's with that blue-haired girl you've got a photo of in your wallet? What were you to each other? Where is she now? And if you didn't have her die so that the tornado wouldn't happen, the alternative is that you've broken up now, in the time between games. And I have seen a lot of people fucking furious about that. Absolutely feeling betrayed by it. But I'm genuinely really into the narrative stuff of the decision they've made there. To not go too into depth on anything, the core of what they've done is they've explored a reality where you've got two people who started dating in their late teens, one of whom has the power to rewind time and fix any mistake that happens by going back in time and changing what happened. And their relationship eventually breaks down because the one who doesn't have time travel powers goes, how can I ever be truly confident that I have the ability to make choices in life? That you're not smoothing out our life to the point where nothing ever goes wrong for us, where maybe I want to do something and it's ultimately going to hurt me down the line and you decide that it's for the best that I never get hurt like that, but you change time so that I never got a chance to try. I just can't feel confident that I'm getting to make my own decisions knowing that you might be changing things to stop me getting hurt.
And I feel bad for everybody who has an emotional investment in that relationship and wanted or expected it to go on. But fuck, that's great. That is really good.
Isn't that really fucking good narrative? It's such an interesting justification. Because, you know what it's done for me? Is it's made me a little bit understand the people who made the other choice, who let her die to save the town. Because the thing is when that choice is being made, she asks you, please, let me die, I don't want to live if it means the town getting destroyed. Mm-hmm. And in the moment, I was like, no, fuck it, the relationship's too important, we're saving you. The only way in which she survives is a world in which, in the first game, she told you, let me die, save the town, and you ignored her wishes there. She's gonna feel to a degree like she doesn't have autonomy over how you use your powers. Mm-hmm. That is an inevitability. And I think it's really interesting to explore a world in which she has some guilt about the fact that a town was destroyed to save her, and that she can never be truly certain whether or not she gets to have the human experiences that are fucking up and letting that shit ride.
And that's... It also, speaks a bit to the protagonist having learned a lesson as a result of this. Because had they not, they would still be together. They would have abused that power in such a way, even repetitively Groundhog Day, going insane doing it.
And this is why I think it's a really interesting choice, in that, like, it's forced us to explore a game with a version of this character who is a bit more aware of the fact that, like, other people
exist?
Yeah, you don't get to be the sole arbiter of what is the correct decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, in terms of the people who, like me, were invested in that relationship, the thing that I think should soften that for people, and I know for some people it won't, there is a follow-up comic series that is an alternative follow-up to the original game, in which the two of them are together, in which the two of them road trip across the country, and a different threat happens, but they are ultimately still together. If that is the follow-up to the first game that you want, it exists. There is a very lengthy comic story that I think is fantastic. As much as, like, part of me was like, oh yeah, follow-up game, probably it'll do the comic thing, I'm like, do I need the comic story again? I very much love the comic story, I think it's great. If you're gonna do a different follow-up to the first game, I feel like give me a different story. And I genuinely really fucking love this as a starting point. I was, like many people, I was a little reluctant to it at first. Seeing it in practice, I'm like, I think it's really interesting. I am not in the majority opinion on this. I have done a little looking online, and the response from the fan base has not been positive. But I think they're cowards. I think this is real interesting.
Yeah, I agree. This makes me want to play Life is Strange, knowing that they'll take that kind of a creative direction with it and be sort of direct and honest.
Yeah, and again, you know, take my opinion with a grain of salt, because I did some work on it, but I do really like this follow-up to the original Life is Strange. I am, like, halfway through Chapter 2 right now, and I think my big takeaway is they've not undone the thing that made the writing about the first game what it was, which was, like, the first game's writing was adults trying to write young adults and being a bit cheesy with it. Those characters still have the vibe of, like, a nerdy mid-20s millennial who's probably still quoting with their friends old Vines from a Vine compilation that anyone like 3 years younger than them has no idea what they're quoting. But the writing generally feels more grounded. It feels like there is more nuance, and I really like that they have gone, look, this character is still a bit awkward and cringe, but well-written awkward and cringe. And I like that.
Yeah, awkward and cringe with intent. And that is a... yeah, sometimes that works. I think about Tim and Eric, and I'm like, no, it doesn't always work for me.
No, but... it's... The thing I think makes it work is that it almost feels like the camera... So, the setting of this new one is a university where main character Max is being a lecturer. It feels almost like the camera perspective on the cringe is from the students who are a few years younger than her. It's... The cringe is being observed from enough of a distance that it's like, we're not unaware that, like, her way of speaking is very locked into her generation. Without getting into too much of the plot stuff, I am very much enjoying it, while also being able to acknowledge, you know, a couple of things. I talked about this on YouTube yesterday when I talked about the fact that I'd done stuff on the game. Let's not ignore the fact that there was a story earlier this year about the fact that Deck 9, the studio behind this game, had a problem with at least one person sneaking Nazi dog whistles into the game, and, you know, it was not taken seriously by higher-ups, and that there was at least one executive in that company who had a real fucking problem with racism, sexism, homophobia, general bigotry. I have been mulling over for months how I want to talk about this game and how to square that away with being excited about having worked on this. The answer that I ultimately landed on was thanks to conversations I had off the record with people on that dev team about the realities of what working there was like and what the game was looking like, and I was very much reassured by people there that regardless of any bullshit going on within that studio, there was a whole lot of people very genuinely trying to make something progressive and forward-thinking and antithetical to that bullshit. And seeing the full game now released, I can say pretty confidently they won out that battle. No matter how many shitty people there were in there who might not have wanted this to be a game full of progressive themes well handled, they were outnumbered by the people loudly and defiantly going, no, fuck it, we're putting progressive shit in this game. And that is reassuring, and that is really good to know. You know, it's not a stand-in for proper acknowledgement and transparency about making sure things are better at that studio. But having played what I've played of it so far now and talking to the people I've talked to, I feel like it's okay for me to be proud to have worked on this. That game's got a whole bunch of cool accessibility shit in it, and at least some of that is because I told them how to make it accessible. And it's one of my first times of getting to look at a boxed video game that's going to be on shelves and going, that game is more accessible to disabled people, because I had opinions at some people. And that feels pretty fucking cool.
It is cool. Congratulations, and you should be proud of your work.
Thank you. Now, I've taken up a good chunk of the episode. Who else has done stuff this week they want to talk about?
At the risk of having you talk more, I noticed that both you and Steph played Metaphor ReFantazio, which I have snagged a copy of and haven't started, and Lord knows may never, because an Atlas game just strikes fear into my heart. But I do want to hear what Steph's thinking of it.
I'm very curious as well.
So I haven't played a massive amount yet. I am... God, I want to say maybe hour and a half, maybe 2 in.
Okay.
God, it really wears the fantasy racism on its sleeve, huh? It's immediate.
It does not waste any time going, hey, we're going to talk about fantasy racism.
It's hard and fast, and not entirely, but it's got a little bit of what I call the poker plot problem, where you have a concept for a game's world, and every single inhabitant of that world talks about nothing but that concept, as if they've got no interests outside of, and in this case, no other interests outside of fantasy racism and what tribe you belong to.
It does lessen up on that. I think the intro is very much like, we want to set this straight. We are not pussyfooting around the fact that this exists. But yeah, the opening, it is like, hey, the theme of this game, we're going to address inequality. It's happening.
Yeah. So, it reaches that cartoonish level of, everything everyone is saying is coming down to what race you are and all of this. And, It's video games. A lot of them take a sledgehammer approach. I'm not put off by it. I just found it very funny. But, it's interesting to see them go that hard and fast. I've talked before about fantasy racism and how it's not bad. Allegory can be a great thing. It just always brings into sharp relief for me how few games talk about actual racism and actual bigotry. Yeah. They've always got to play it safe, to clothe it in the trappings of fantastical races.
And again, without saying too much, the thing that I find interesting about this game is that it does eventually make that leap of initially having this idea of, we've got these fantasy racism problems going on, but not that far in, there is a thought posed by a character that is something to the effect of, well, if we didn't have, the fantasy species we have here, we were all just, one kind of species that didn't have, different physical we didn't have horns and pointy ears and whatnot. It would be a utopia where everyone loved each other and saw each other as the same. It is going somewhere with that. It does start to poke at the idea that, people will find reasons to be bigots to each other regardless of how much or little separates them in ways that I think are interesting.
That's good to know. There are little bits already where I'm like, God, I really hope that this, even if it sticks with fantasy, if it does make it more clear than a lot of those other games do. Because like I say, it's not a criticism to use allegory. I love a good allegory. It's more a criticism of the industry than any individual game, but I did notice at one point it talks about having a fantasy book, and it mentions that, this is a world where no one is discriminated against for their birth. Truly a fantasy story.
Yeah, so the thing is, it becomes pretty apparent pretty early. The world that book is talking about is our world.
I got that clue from the city buildings that, in the illustrations.
Yeah, but the thing I think it gets out well, better than a lot of these stories that do fantasy racism allegory, is addressing the fact that allegorical stories about overcoming racism can only carry you so far, because ultimately, whatever you imagine would be the solution in this fantasy abstracted world might not work out that well in practice when you try and apply it to the realities of the world you happen to be in.
I was hoping for something like that.
Yeah. It starts getting into some interesting stuff with that. I don't know where it's going to end yet on that, how far it's going to go, but it's definitely, fascinated with that idea of maybe fantasy stories about, fantasy racism being overcome don't really dig into the realities of what overcoming racism actually kind of means when you're in it.
Awesome. Yeah, I was hoping it was going somewhere interesting along those lines with that, the reference to the fantasy story and everything. From the very outset, it does make it very clear that it knows you're playing a game and tries to rope in the fact that you're playing the game where you're sat into the universe of that world. So it's very clear that it's doing some clever stuff, and that definitely has kept me intrigued. I have enjoyed it so far. I didn't know much about this one at all. It was honestly your recommendation and someone in my stream chat, really bigging it up. And the fact it both happened on the same day, I was like, okay, there's something to this. Plus, of course, having the Persona DNA is interesting. So I bought this one on faith so much that I was legitimately surprised it was a fantasy game. That's how little I knew about it.
It's high fantasy.
Yeah, I was like, oh shit, this is fucking
wizards,
medieval
elves
times.
and shit.
Yeah, wizards and Game of Thronesy fucking shit. I'm all for that.
It's a bit of a tone shift for the Persona team.
Sort of. Because then you get to the bit where one of the guys unlocks his special ability and he's holding his own metal heart like a microphone.
Yes,
and I'm like, oh yes, this is the Persona people.
He's not awakening his persona, he's activating his archetype.
That's it, yes, activating his archetype. There's a lot of that.
He's not ripping his mask off, he's pulling his metal heart out. Yeah. It's technically different.
It's not a one-to-one copy of Persona. It's clearly doing its own thing outside of just the world building. But yeah, it's funny that it is so Persona-ish. Because that style, Persona's very sort of over-the-top, exaggerated coolness, just this overwhelming sense of everything's got to be cool. Applying that to high fantasy, I'm hoping that continues to be a source of joy.
The clashing is pretty amusing.
Excellent. Other than that, the gameplay is cool. Again, very similar to Persona. I do appreciate if a monster is a lower level to you, you can just hack and slash without going into turn-based. I'm always a big fan of streamlining RPG mechanics, like turn-based RPGs, because some of them, especially older ones, can be so ponderous, and you certainly don't like it when there's random battles and you're in a low-level area and it takes longer for the battle animations to start than finishing the fight. So I'm always a fan of, these enemies are lower level than you. Dispatch of them really quick. Get them out the way, because it's all said and done anyway. That's cool. I'm only at the early goings. I've only got 3 archetypes. The 2 you get in the story, and then the 1 you get when you first go into the menu, and there's that other 1 to unlock. So I've only got the 3, and I'm already feeling a little overwhelmed. And that's more on me than the game, because I get very easily overwhelmed by intricacies.
I get that. To jump in, there's a thing that might make it feel a little less scary, maybe, to know, which is most of those classes have, like, only maybe, like, 5 things total you could potentially unlock on them. If you, like, max out a class, you maybe learn 5 things for that class.
Yeah.
The impression I've gotten the more I've played of this is it is not a game that wants you to be, like, trying to 100% everything. What it wants you to do is dip your toes in a lot of different shit and not worry too much about, like, feeling like you're committed to any one build choice.
It makes a big point of that. Like, multiple tutorial and, like, bits of text constantly tell you, switch shit up. If you're in a particular dungeon with particular monsters, change your shit.
Yeah, so, like, I'll give you, like, a little example, and, like, one bit of advice I'd give to people playing this game of, like, a thing to prioritize doing early, because I think it'll help gameplay flow a lot. When you get the option to have the healer class, like, which is a fairly early on one, get that to level 10 as quickly as you can. There's a little quest that's, like, get your healer to level 10 and you'll unlock something. What it unlocks is the ability to swap your classes at any time from the pause menu, rather than having to go to an NPC to change your classes.
Cool.
And that opens up the ability to be real flexible with them. The example I think about a lot is the mage class. If you beat up low-level enemies without, like, starting a random battle, you get MP back. Which is fucking great for long dungeons where you're like, oh, here's a whole floor of this dungeon where it's all just low-level stuff that I'm not having to go into real-time battles with. Cool. I'll swap my lead character to the mage, run around beating stuff up so I get MP back. Oh, I've gone to a floor where there's stronger stuff. I'll swap back to my primary character class because I know I'm going to have to do real-time battles. That's the kind of way I think about these classes, is less about, like, the intricate skills they have, and I'm like, what do I want for my party composition? And is there a moment where it's like, oh, it would be good to farm some free MP by being the mage right now, and to just, like, use it for a minute and then put it away.
I love what it's doing. And again, this is me, not the game. I find the idea of that a little intimidating, because it is a fair bit to keep track of, and my brain does not keep track well. The thing that really sort of made me pause for a moment was when I realised that switching the archetype impacts the gear you're wearing. And then I'm like, God, do I have to keep track of multiple armor sets and stuff? I'm hoping not, but it's that kind of micromanaging that puts me off.
So, nice news, you don't. If you, like, swap to a class and then swap back, it'll re-equip all the stuff you had equipped last time you were that class.
I have noticed that. It's more making sure I have enough different sets of things for that to happen.
If nothing else, you will always have a basic set of gear for every class. Like, if you swap to a class, it will magic out of thin air a basic set of gear for that class, at least. That much alone, most of your stat improvement is coming from your character leveling up rather than the class. The class leveling up is mostly about unlocking those new skills. You're not at a huge disadvantage if you swap to a new class and equip the basic starter equipment it brings up out of thin air to make sure you can use them. It don't make the biggest difference, and I think that helps.
Cool. Because that's one of the areas I'm looking at with this game where I'm like, I think I might have more fun if I just don't worry about it. If I just trust that it'll be okay and then focus on the bits I can properly comprehend.
Yeah, honestly, it's been a pretty good game at letting you just not stress about it too much.
That's good to know. That's very good to know.
As I say, I would recommend getting healer to level 10 so that you can swap your classes, like, just whenever the fuck you want.
I mean, I'm all about healing anyway, so...
Yeah, you can just kind of not worry about it too much at that point.
That's cool. I am excited to play more. I'll probably end up doing that after we're done here. The idea of collecting characters for this kind of thing, it's what I liked most about Persona. And like, the old Shadow Hearts game where you could collect different forms for the main character to turn into. I love that shit. When you marry that with the wonderful character design that these games always have. Like, another thing that made me, like, look at the game and go, yep, that's Persona, was the first quote-unquote human you meet, the moth-headed, apple-growing, leggy thing.
The fucking Hieronymus Bosch, its body is a pomegranate, and it's got apples hanging off it, and it's like, oh, you're just a big dancing metaphor about the evils of eating fruit, I see.
Yeah, that's That's the perfect way of describing it as well. It's like pop art Hieronymus Bosch. That is the Persona art style. And I love it. And that's part of what is keeping me invested in the idea of finding archetypes, because I know they're going to look cool. I saw the names of some of them when you're in that magic library.
Oh, looking at the books upstairs, yeah.
I skimmed through it, but one was called Masked Dancer, and I'm like, that's just going to be cool. That's just
I
gonna be
haven't
cool.
seen them yet, but that's the one I'm intrigued by.
I know nothing about the Masked Dancer, but I know how, like, dancey characters tend to work in games like this, and I know what the Persona folks are capable of. It's gonna be great. So yeah, I really like the character designs. That mage, the first one you get independent of characters, just looks really awesome. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing more. Definitely. I think it's too early for me to give any truly deep opinions on it, but...
The problem with any RPG, you've got to get a ways in to really get a feel, but...
Yeah, but it's very promising, and I'm very on the hook.
I'm glad it's got your initial interest. Yeah. What about you, Conrad? What have you been playing this week?
Oh, this week I finally dug into UFO 50, and I like it a lot. I like the dedication to producing an artifact that feels legitimate. Like, it is an amazing fraud that they've perpetrated here, which I truly do respect. I mean, down to little details like the actual opening sequence of the software being a trade scene, a Crackers introduction with period appropriate music, and sort of also like telling the story of UFO 50 as a product in its meta narrative, with Derek Yu and the other real people who made this finding the hardware in a storage locker and dusting it off, and the presentation with these incredibly low resolution photographs that have been, put into low color, low res. It's gorgeous. It's perfect. And the detail, the consistency in all of the information that the game provides, the introduction of characters that are developers, and you see their names pop up several times, and you start to wonder a little bit about them, which is interesting. I think the first game that they have that, I mean, I'm thinking this because I managed to complete 2 of the games next to each other on the list, and so it has led me to suspect that one of them is the first instance of proper credits at the end of the game. And it's interesting to see the names start to come up and repeat themselves. In terms of some of the actual, like, games that are in it,
there are some I will never go back to.
Yeah, and I think to not be immediately turned off by them means having an appreciation, like a true appreciation for the design elements and seeing some of them implemented again. Barbuda, the very first released game. Boy, that is such a... I mean, it feels like a ZX Spectrum game, or it feels more like a Commodore 64 game, if I'm being honest. It reminds me a little bit of, there was a Spider-Man platformer for Commodore 64 that has that kind of stiff movement, and I did not get on with it at all. No.
It's not one of my faves.
No. I did like the cheeky insta-death that it features. That was
yes.
There's things to like and appreciate about it. It's going to be a hard sell for me to return to it. Anything, I think it's a Tactics or a Tactics. It's a tactical strategy game. I opened it up, I looked at the board, I said, no, just not now. Maybe one day I will come, but I know this is simple, but it is also arcane.
Yeah, but again, the thing about there being, 50 is that you can have that, no, and, shuffle a thing off straight away and not feel like you're dismissing a huge part of the package.
Absolutely. Yeah, there is so much in here and so much variety. And it is the kind of thing that I especially love, where all of the mechanics are familiar. Everything in here is something I have seen somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
But with a little tweak, and maybe that tweak is something I've seen somewhere else in a different context, but applied to whatever core mechanic that they're using. Most of this stuff seems to be movement-based, which I find really interesting, that there's so much attention paid to the different ways in which movement can be achieved and executed in these games is fascinating to me. The homages are often very clear and still creative. I'm thinking right now of Kick Club.
Yes.
Which is, god damn, it's Bubble Bobble.
Yeah.
But I love the central mechanic of the ball in it, and the versatility in your moveset. You have all of these games are 2-button, and the amount of versatility that they manage to put into 2-button movement is amazing. Kick Club requiring you to, it's Bubble Bobble, but you have to go collect the bubble first. And then execute on it, and it has multi-directional firing with that soccer ball that you have to kick around, and learning the angles and figuring out how to get multiple enemies at once. It's such a pure, familiar experience, and so engrossing for me as a big fan of Bubble Bobble.
It's a lot of really creative ideas about, if you've got limited tech for what you can represent and limited inputs, what can you find unique to play around with in that?
Yes.
And it does really impressively at coming up with original ideas that feel like they're, whether it's technically true or not, it feels like there's no reason you couldn't have done it back in the day.
Yeah. Well,
no, okay, that's not as...
I'll get there.
Yeah.
There's 2 games that I've finished, as I said earlier, and one of them is due to utter fascination, and the other is down to dogged stubbornness. Mooncat?
Okay, yeah.
Mooncat is amazing. And I feel like I'm wondering if because last week you had mentioned that there was a game that you were doing pretty well in, but you just couldn't understand the movement and how you were doing well.
Yeah.
And I feel like that might have been Mooncat.
Yeah. And I've gotten my head around it now, but yeah.
I adore this. It is incredibly frustrating at first to get a handle on. All of these games, they are arcane to a degree, and they give you a nudge, but that's it. Now, they are all really good at providing you with a place to experiment when you need to experiment to learn.
Yeah, because, to give the basicest hint about this one, you're running around, and you're able to jump, and you're able to do a little ground slam, but it's not initially clear how you determine left or right.
Yeah, instead of doing a directional pad for movement, basically, your D-pad moves you one direction, your face buttons move you another direction. And those are your only inputs, D-pad and face buttons. They all do the same things on both ends. And it is using those buttons in conjunction that allows you to achieve other forms of movement than just back and forth directional.
I genuinely love Mooncat, but when I looked at the game controls... And the controls were D-pad up, D-pad down, D-pad left, D-pad right, X and A. All of them say move.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. That's one of the ones that I think about in terms of, really capturing that feel of you got a weird disc off someone and, there's... You just gotta kind of fucking puzzle it out.
And even once you do, like, you're constantly fighting everything you know about playing a platformer.
Your muscle memory can't help you here.
No, it's an active hindrance to your success. Knowing how to play platformers makes Mooncat harder. And I love that. It's so interesting. But also, you can overcome it. And when you start to find a rhythm, which will probably be temporary until you stop moving and your muscle memory tries to kick back in. But when you can get into that flow state of running through a level and executing the movement the way that it wants you to do it, it feels incredible. Great fun. And then the game that I managed to play through stubborn persistence, and this is actually, I've got the demo reel running on my computer right now. It's Bushido Ball.
Oh, yeah.
This is a Pong-like, where you have two samurai or samurai-adjacent feudal Japanese warriors on either side of a field. A ball enters play, and you swing your swords to hit the ball back and forth. If the ball collides with the player instead of being struck by them, it'll still stop and bounce, but it'll give it an upward lift. It'll kill the momentum a bit, and it'll stun your character briefly. Every character has a dash, and the dash can be used in conjunction with the swing to put spin on the ball, which increases its velocity as more of these attacks get hit, reaching a state where the ball becomes like a fireball, and if it comes into contact with you, you have to do a tap to resist that. The game gives you such a narrow window to execute on and requires such accuracy. And that's one of the things that I think is both interesting and frustrating about Bushido Ball is it is precision based. It's very timing based in such a way that every action interrupts another action. And so accidentally hitting the wrong button briefly will cause you to fail at something, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Your timing on attacks coming out of dodges has to be perfect because you're not going to move again. And so you need to make sure you're hitting it just right. You have to be in almost a zen state to play this well. And oh my god, the last two levels of it are so infuriatingly frustrating. Every character has a special ability, and it's executed by tapping on your attack after your first swing, I think. But maybe not. Maybe it's different for other characters. I don't know. I played the one character. I played all the way through with the one character. I'm never playing the fucking game again. But you can use those to stun the opposing player or to put further power on the ball once it's out of range of your swing. There's also a charge up attack that you have to sort of like ready as the opponent is receiving the ball. And you can see when they're setting it up too, and everybody's works a little bit differently, and so you can prepare for blocking that to some extent, but like there's not enough time for me to think about how to do that well. But it is well made, and I bet in 2-player, fucking fun as shit. I bet that is a really good, like, on the range of Samurai Gun type competitive. I'd like to see it at EVO, you know? That'd be neat. But I don't want to play that single player again. Like, and there you go. It has perfectly recreated the single player sports game experience on these early consoles as well.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I think those are mostly the ones that have stood out, apart from the last. So there's this game called Pilot Quest. And I had spoiled this aspect for myself by looking at a Steam review. The top review on Steam, when I read it, said, hey, play Pilot Quest first. And they're right. Because Pilot Quest is an idle game.
Yeah.
It's technically a top-down Zelda-like exploration game with a random map generator, but it's an idle game.
Mm.
You have a gem in the middle of this little town that you've crashed your spaceship outside of. You have a yo-yo as a weapon. You can hit the gem. The gem produces moon shards. And the moon shards can be spent to buy seeds. And the seeds produce plants that produce more moon shards at a rate of 1 every 2 seconds. And then you can take 100 moon shards and turn them into a moon ingot. Or no, it's 1,000, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's 1,000 to turn them into an ingot. And then you need moon ingots to build houses for people to come live there and to build crafts tables that they will use to make more ingots for you.
It's you turned fucking Cookie Clicker into into a top-down RPG.
And fine. Like, I'm gonna be compelled by that because that it is engineered to get that kind of hook into susceptible people. And yeah, it's gonna work. I don't have to be happy about it. I don't have to like it. And more to the point, this is where, for me, the illusion shatters. Because I know this is like the 3rd generation computer that, was produced in the line, and it, so it used the system clock to determine how much you played. And I know that you can make a case that they, in this emulated format, engineered it a different way so that it works while the software is run. But I'm sorry. No.
Yeah. So, I think it helps that I played it last. Because it's right in the, the mid to high 40s,
Yeah,
I think.
it's 44.
Out of 50.
Yeah, 44.
44. I think it helps that I had, as long as I did, immersed in stuff that felt like it was true to the conceit. That when I had to suspend my disbelief, I was like, okay, I've been here several hours, you've earned a little bit of me letting it slide.
Yeah.
In a way that if you started there, I can see how that would feel very different.
And I'm not mad. I'm genuinely not mad at it. Like, they are doing creative things, and I mean, this thing is replete with concepts that are far ahead of their time, and that is, I think, part of the lore to an extent.
Yeah.
How ahead of this time, and yet ultimately unsuccessful, or at least able to fade away to nothing and be forgotten and become lost media in that way, is compelling. But it is also an idle game, something that really didn't start to permeate the culture until the late aughts.
It's the one title that I think does a little cross the line between, wouldn't it be interesting if someone had had this idea back in the day, versus, this is a genre that, not only mechanically I struggle to believe would have happened, but that is so much of the modern era and is so much of a different way of thinking fundamentally about what games are.
Yeah.
That it's a little, I can believe that someone came up with an interesting idea ahead of their time, unless that idea requires the industry to be a very different industry.
Yeah. It's worth remembering, too, what the origin of the idle game is. As a joke. As a commentary on the state of video game design. One of the earliest examples is Progress Quest, which was a piss take of RPGs that you just grind in to, progress. That's what it was. And that goes back to 2001, I think, 2000, somewhere around there. I can remember having that application running on my PC. Cow Clicker, another seminal work in the development of the genre. A joke about the industry, about the meaninglessness of it. Cookie Clicker.
I love Cookie Clicker.
Again, a huge, consumption joke. And this feels so not. It feels like a genuine thing. And I can't help but feel, to a certain extent, it betrays that origin of that genre to an extent, to have it not be a joke.
It's a reflection of a thing
Becoming normalized.
Yeah. The industry hadn't...
it wouldn't have.
You need to believe that a normalization of a thing has happened for this game to make sense in a way that, like, it breaks the wall a little more than other stuff.
Yep. But it is well constructed, like, everything in this. Like, every game in this is well made. I cannot fault the design of anything I've played. It is reflecting what these things were like to such an extent. The creativity, the range, it does make me long somewhat for when games and the industry was kind of like this.
It captures something very special, even if there are some edges.
There's some shit games. I mean, we can be honest about that. There's some shit games.
I talked about this last week. There is some games in there that I do not enjoy, but again, it's a big enough anthology that I'm willing to dig and find the stuff that's cool.
There are games that are good, and there are games that you appreciate. I don't think there's a bad game necessarily in here from if you can take that perspective on it. But a lot of them aren't fun. And, and some of those are going to be down to, personal choice, for sure. I'm sure that every game in here is someone's favorite.
Yeah.
The one where you're the fish submarine and everything, and you can't make progress because everything's constantly getting stolen from you and you don't have enough fuel to get anywhere. Fuck that. Onion Delivery, that should be a great game. But, oh, boy, it's too fast for its own good. Another thing that I do think is interesting contextually about this game and where it fits within its narrative is how arcadey a lot of this is, but it's not quarter munchy. And I think there's a really valuable distinction here. It very quickly gets out of the territory of a game where it feels like somebody was making it hard specifically to make people pump quarters into it. And it does have some conventions that I would argue are probably more modern than the era they're trying to convey in terms of checkpointing and things like that. But it is appreciated from the point of view that these are console or home PC games. They're not arcade games. And that kind of design would have been abandoned pretty quickly, particularly in a device that is, it's these are first-party titles. They would be making for their hardware. They know that people are buying these games, so they're going to be producing them with that in mind. And I appreciate that. So yeah, UFO 50 is very, very interesting. It is hard to recommend to people who do not have some kind of deep interest in the history of game design mechanics or a love for a time and place that no longer exists in gaming.
It's not a recommend for everyone, but when you started sharing your story about the bus last week, I was like, this is a recommend for you.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. I do really enjoy it. I will play all 50 games eventually, even if some of them is the extent of opening up a Tractix, saying I am not going to figure this out right now and never touching it again.
Yeah. I've got a quick one I can talk about that I messed around with this week. So those who stuck around to the very end of last week's episode will have heard us in real time discover the existence of Nintendo Alarmo.
Ah, yes.
I may have spent a few days playing around with an Alarmo.
Oh, dear.
And I am fascinated by the weird jankiness of this device. So for anyone who's not aware or didn't stick around for it, Alarmo is a Nintendo alarm clock available only to people who are Nintendo Online subscriber, expansion plus subscribers or whatever.
Or if you were in New York at the Nintendo World Store there, they did have them available. I assume they sold out in a couple of hours.
My understanding is yes. So unless you were very geographically related, like, yeah, it's a clock with a dial/button on top and an LCD screen and motion sensors. And the idea is that it is an alarm clock that, like, you have to get out of bed to stop your alarm going is the sales pitch.
I'm going to push back a little bit. That wasn't really the sales pitch I picked up. The video that I watched suggested that you were going to enjoy slowly getting out of your bed and facing the day with Nintendo music sort of uplifting you and then giving you fanfare at the end to celebrate your success. However, I assume in practice it's quite different.
Oh, I've got a whole different place to start with this thing. I'm too married for this device.
That was something that I'd heard elsewhere, and I hadn't considered.
Yeah, so this is a motion sensing device that makes it clear in its pamphlet that comes with it that it is designed for people who are the only person sleeping in their bed.
Right.
And fundamentally, it gets a bit confused if there's more than one person in the bed that it is tracking. It gets a bit confused by that.
Right, because it's sensing motion, and...
Yeah, but that's not the only thing it gets confused by. It also, it seems, gets confused if you have too thick a set of blankets.
Oh.
It's becoming winter here, and, you know, me and Jane... we've doubled up the duvets. We've got the regular duvet, and then we've put the winter duvet on top of that to just be, like, it really snuggle up warm. So we are under, like, some thick layers of blankets. And this seems to be the reason why Nintendo Alarmo believes that on the first night I had it set up, I slept for 14 hours. And the second night I slept for 19 hours. I think it was tracking the duvet that was still quite a large presence in the bed. Mm. The bed hadn't, like, become... absent of mass enough for it to believe I'd gotten up.
Well, so I want to go back to the too married thing. Because an interesting discussion that sort of came up in my Discord about this was one of those who is this for conversations, right? And my position on who is this for is the same as my position on every Nintendo product. Children.
Yeah, 1,000%. That is what this is.
Yeah, because, and you know, like, the $99 price tag has led some people to be like, oh, well, this is for adult collectors. And then they go on from there to be like, Nintendo thinks you're going to be forever alone as an adult buying their product.
No.
You know,
I mean, as someone who has had quite a few altercations with Nintendo fans,
yeah,
not necessarily far off.
It's a funny joke, but
yeah, no, I get you.
I'm under no illusions about this. I recognize that this is you set it up a bit of a way away from the bed and make getting out of bed like, oh, you got out of bed and a fanfare played. Doesn't that make you less anti-getting up? It is for children,
and that's okay. That's fine. Like, when I say that, I don't want people to get all fucking defensive about their love for children's products. It's fine.
When I say I'm too married for it, I mean in the sense that, like, there are some functions of this clock that Jane has never seen happen because of our bedtime routine.
Mm.
I typically, you know, will decide to go to bed and, like, I'll finish brushing my teeth and head up, I'll usually be up, like, maybe 5 minutes before Jane. And you get into bed, and a thing it does that's kind of nice is, like, you get into bed and it senses you getting into the bed and starts just playing some gentle ambient, like, hey, just a little bit of unwind, gentle music for a bit. Like, maybe your alarm's set around around Breath of the Wild, you've got gentle sounds of nighttime from Zelda with a little crackling fire. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. Just, like, set the vibe for, relax, it's time for bed. But it lasts, like, 5 minutes... and it always stops, like, a second before Jane gets upstairs. Mm-hmm. And her getting into bed doesn't activate it because it only assumes one person sleeps in a bed. So her getting into bed, it's like, well, you're already in bed. So she's never heard this thing do, gentle, like, isn't this a calm way to sort of settle into bed? Because the thought of a second person getting into bed just isn't a thing this is equipped for.
Now, this could push a new, movement, a return to the idea of married people sleeping in separate beds.
You need 2 Alarmos, one on either side of the...
My grandparents had a whole bed fixture setup that had end table thing between 2 beds, and it was really quite nice. But you just stick 2 Alarmos back to back, that solves all the problems. Everybody can enjoy Alarmo.
Here's the other thing that tells you this is not designed for adults, because if you're an adult, it's going to take you about 15 seconds to realize I don't have to jump out of bed to get my little fanfare. I can just hit the button on the top and it stops.
Yeah.
I can just treat it like an alarm clock. And look, I don't hate this thing. It's kind of cute. As someone that has the infuriating alarms that I can't stand the sound of that actually wake me up, this has, in the couple of days it's been here, basically acted as, here's a little bit of nice music that's the last alarm. When I hear that, I actually have to get up. It goes from okay, we're awake, but we're enjoying just having a little cuddle in bed, to, okay, we got to actually do something. Nintendo's telling us to move now.
Oh, sure, you'll do something when
Nintendo's
Nintendo tells you to do it.
Yeah, apparently so. Apparently, Nintendo playing some nice music, I'm okay, fine. Look, it's a funky little novelty. Given that it sounds like the Switch 2 is just going to be the Switch but more, I'm glad Nintendo has an outlet for their weird little funky ideas still. In my heart of hearts, I have a theory, and I don't believe it's true, but I want to believe it, which is that secretly this is going to be integral to the Switch 2, and if you don't have this, the Switch 2 is not going to work. I'm the early adopter, I got the Alarmo, I'll be able to get my Switch 2 notifications in my fucking alarm clock or whatever. I don't think that's the case, but that has amused me as a thought. Alarmo, it sure is an alarm clock for an amount of money. What about you, Steph? You playing anything else this week?
That's a great tagline. They should have used that.
Right. Why didn't they ask me, consultant Laura Kate Dale, who consults on things?
So, the thing that has stopped me playing more Metaphor Fantasio than I'd have liked, ReFantazio, right, made up words.
Yeah.
Is the fact that I have become utterly addicted to the new Starship Troopers game, which I did not expect. I love Starship Troopers. In fact, I was inspired to rewatch it after playing the game for a bit, and it still holds up. It's still a good fucking laugh. Unfortunately, the game does not retain any of the satire or anything, except it for one clever little thing it does. But it's a good game. It's really gripped me. A lot of people are like, well, we don't need this because we've got Helldivers. And yeah, there's similarities, and Helldivers nails the satire bit. But this is 16 players, and there's this base building element, as well as a whole bunch of first-person shooting. And it works together really well. So you build stuff exactly like Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. You're placing structures in this preset building area to make a base, to prepare for a siege, essentially. There's not a great deal of stuff to build. There's, different types of walls, couple of offensive things, gates, stuff like that. But it's really fun. It's really fun to, put this base together as quickly as possible, because hundreds of alien killer bugs are about to come out of the ground and try and get in. So you're running around placing this stuff, and surprisingly, I've not really seen people fighting over it. Everyone has a good idea of what to do. So you get some people placing structures, then other people building them. There's a repair tool thing that lets you place structures and then zap the ghost of that structure to make it a physical thing. Everyone is pitching in. It's very much got... The film loves that line, the I'm doing my part thing. And that really feels like it, because especially at the beginning, I was like, I don't want to build anything. But I will run around and zap the walls people have placed to fix it up and make it real. And I have multiple times just been there, making these walls happen, just thinking, yes, I am doing my part. And it's great. You get a little bit of XP for it and all, so everyone's encouraged to pitch in. And it's cute. The base building is cute. And then the bugs happen, and there's hundreds of them, and you shoot them loads, and it's cool. And you're like on the walls of your base, just aiming down, just blasting at them because they are like trying to break in, and then you can get your repair tool out and you're trying to keep things fixed up while they're trying to get in. And there's so many of them. There's loads of them, like as you'd hope from a Starship Troopers game, swarms of the fucking things. And all of their bodies stay on the ground as physical objects when they die, which is hilarious because by the end of it, there are mountains of corpses. And there's also a gameplay element to that because they're not things you just clip through like in most games. They still have a physical presence. So if there's enough of them and you open a gate, you can't close the gate again because there's too many bodies. So you've got to either go over there and melee the bodies to break them apart, or there is a demolisher class that can set down charges that will explode to clear them all out. So that's cool. But for the most part, it's just funny to see that many bodies after a big fight. There's a couple of classes. They've all got a use. Some of their unlocks aren't very useful. The medic is a bit fiddly. It's a very janky game. Very, a buggy. Most of it's like the charming janky stuff, but it has also crashed a fair bit, which that sucks because missions can take a while. But for the most part, I've just really enjoyed it. I've really had fun with it. There is a simplicity to it that just speaks to me, and I think it does enough to differentiate itself from Helldivers. It's not as stylish and polished, but the scale of it really works. Any given mission, you are shooting hundreds and hundreds of these things, and with 16 players, it does feel like there's this small little army going, and everyone I've seen works together really well because the game's done a really good job of incentivizing them. Even the more self-motivated players will still get XP by performing their class roles and maintaining the base. So, yeah, it works out really well. And I have put so many hours into it, it's silly. I've just finished drafting my review for it, so that'll be going up soon. I am torn on the score because if I go purely based on how long I've spent playing it and loving it, then yeah, we're looking at an 8, maybe even a 9, as janky as it is, and as much as I'd probably be an outlier. But the crashes are significant, so that becomes a thing. To the game's credit, whereas with many games, if it crashed like that and diddled me out of XP, I wouldn't want to turn it on again. Almost every time, I have gone straight back into it because I'm that on the hook. Other than that, my other big criticism, I've got lots of little complaints, but my other big criticism is the cosmetics are the worst I've ever seen. Like, ignoring the fact that most of them are DLC, even the DLC ones look mostly fucking ugly. It's bold of a game to have you play for hours and hours to unlock tan as a colour, or swamp green as a colour. It is all that. It's so drab. All of these cosmetics, tan, brown, dark green, navy blue, and muted versions of it at that. Even the visors that you can recolour on your helmet, they come in more varied colours, but like they're all dark and muted. It's just not part of the game to a degree I'd like. However, that might in part be because of the one clever thing the game does. You can't pick your gender. And normally, I'd be like, nah mate, fuck off with that. No girl, no deal. But the thing is your voice, and therefore presumably your gender and stuff at any given time, it changes every mission. You are randomly assigned. You keep your class, but that's what you're building. You're not building a character. Because why would you? Because this is Starship Troopers, and the Federation has a turnover of hundreds and thousands of troopers. So I thought it's just this really clever little touch that makes it very clear and sort of makes that distinction between the fact that you're not playing a character. You are in the boots of a soldier that happens to be that class that you picked. And I do wish the rest of the game was like that, or it had more like that. The other stuff's very surface level. The game loves the I'm doing my part line. There's some, cute propaganda-looking posters for loading screens. I wish there'd be more satire because it's so down to business and straight-faced. And I think more could have been done. But I also think the main audience for this isn't going to be like me. They're not going to want that kind of satire and sarcasm in a game about shooting big killer bugs. And the shooting of the big killer bugs has kept me very engaged. And as someone who really likes Starship Troopers, and not just because Paul Verhoeven directed it and therefore it's a wonderfully sarcastically made film, I just always thought those arachnids were fucking cool. It's such a good alien design. Just these big insects that are basically knives. Really cool. To that end, I would have liked to have seen more bug variants. You've got your basic warriors and drones, and then like a big tiger, which is like an oversized warrior. There's grenaders that are like small versions of that huge big beetle in the film. The big beetle I have met once in my dozens of hours playing as a giant boss. There's also inferno bugs that shoot fire and gunners that I hate. I just hate them. Haven't seen any of the flying ones, haven't seen any hoppers, or anything more original to the game, which I would like to see. But we'll see, even though it came out of early access and stuff, apparently like the project lead did say that they are still adding stuff, and apparently the claim was, anything you've seen from the film will eventually get into the game. So I don't know if that means they will add more satire. They did say, though, that shower scenes are probably the one thing that won't make it in, which is a good Verhoeven trope. But there was a joke that having like a player hub where they start out might be a shower. So, yeah, I really like it. I am eager to see if they keep expanding it, but I've gotten so much mileage out of what there is. I've really enjoyed it. Just be aware if anyone does buy it, it is janky as fuck.
You played anything else this week, Conrad?
No, nothing worth talking about.
Did you have any other ones you wanted to do, Steph, or should we?
No.
A good place for us to do a wrap for this week.
Yeah, I started playing Faith again, that old one. I get as far as collecting a couple of notes, then I get got by the monster and have to start again, and then I stop. That last time I played it as well. That's about it. I did just download Dino Crisis because that made its way onto PSN, so that's going to be fun. And then, yeah, that is me. That's me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in that case, should we leave it there for this week?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's just skip news. Who cares?
Who cares about
it's only
news?
video games.
Look, the most newsworthy thing that this week was a bunch of Pokemon stuff leaked, and part of it was some kind of weird fan fiction some of the writers wrote that led to people doing little YouTube thumbnails of Typhlosion having to make apology videos. Like that's about the most newsworthy thing that happened this week.
All right.
Well, there we are then.
Glad we covered it.
Absolutely.
That's the news. That's it covered. Typhlosion should be sorry for its crimes.
That's it covered. But there is no crime to your coverage, Laura, of which there's a lot. And maybe you'd like to tell the audience about it.
Oh, you can find all the stuff I do at Laura K. Buzz, all the places on the internet. That's the thing you could do. Laura K. Buzz, all the places. If you want to know a bit more about me being involved in doing accessibility stuff for Life is Strange Double Exposure, there's a video about that up on YouTube you can go check out. I'm continuing my slow rewatch of the show Wandering Sun that I watched in one evening 15 years ago and came out as trans that same night. Upon rewatching it, I am realizing quite how fucking oblivious I was as person who hadn't yet come out about the fact there was more than one trans woman in this show. And that flew entirely past me because the idea of a second trans woman was more than I could take in that day, apparently. So that's been a fun journey. Come follow me along with that on YouTube. Laura K. Buzz, there's stuff coming. It's going to be interesting. Keep an eye out. What about you, Conrad? Where are you at on the internet?
Oh, you could find me at Conrad Zimmerman on Instagram and Blue Sky, and you can hang out with me on Twitch, twitch.tv/thatConradZimmerman. I'm on Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, come hang out. You can buy anti-capitalist propaganda and Jimquisition merchandise at mercenarycreative.com. And everything I do online gets supported through Patreon at patreon.com/fistshark. And you know who else has a Patreon? Stephanie Sterling.
Yes, indeed. It is patreon.com/Jimquisition. So this supports this show and the Jimquisition main show and reviews on the Jimquisition.com. My next... I also stream, which is an irregular thing, but I try and do it a couple times a week. Twitch TV/Jim Sterling. Might be doing more Starship Troopers next time because it's one of those great games that's just easy streaming. My next wrestling day, first of all, thank you to folks who were there at Tidal this past Sunday where I turned heel. So far just at Tidal. My next wrestling appearance, I'm very much still nominally on the side of good because I will be taking on Jack Johnson and a mystery partner, and I will be tagging with the original Gain. I know there's now 2 gay Canes running around the Brit Rest scene, but I'm tagging with the original Gain, and I might be shopping for a little pedal tricycle so I can come out as the Commander Taker, doing the biker gimmick. That is Pinfall Pro Wrestling. That's in Manchester. That is on October 27th. See if I get that right. October 27th. Pinfall Pro Wrestling. Come see it. It'll be good. It'll be good. They do a fun little show. And that's it. That's it for now. We will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening, supporting all of that jizz. And we will see you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.